There's also complete agreement in the Democratic caucus that this president must be held accountable, that no one is above the law, that we have a responsibility to conduct oversight, to follow the facts where they lead.
But there's not agreement on impeachment.
No, we're not going to let the president engage in a cover-up and prevent the American people from learning the truth.
That is House Judiciary Committee member, Democratic Congressman David Cicilline, as his panel prepares to question Watergate star witness and former Nixon White House counsel John Dean in a hearing on the Mueller report this afternoon. Arizona Congressman Andy Biggs is a Republican on the panel reacting to the news in a new op-ed where he writes, quote, House Dems John Dean testimony stunt would be comical if it was not so desperate. Congressman Biggs joins us now. Congressman, good morning to you. First up, as far as the actual details of this hearing, what do we need to know ahead of it?
Well, what's going to happen is the chairman's going to make his statement and introduce Mr. Dean, and Mr. Dean should get an opportunity to make a statement. And then, quite frankly, it's going to be questions, very short amount of time to ask questions for each member from each side. So it's going to be a long hearing, and it's probably going to be contentious. And I don't think we're going to see much accomplished, quite frankly.
You predict it'll be contentious. What role will you play in that hearing?
Well, I will be making my statement as to Mr. Dean and the hearing itself, because I think what we're seeing is something that is just absolutely a travesty, and it's desperation on the part of the Democrats to try, because they don't like President Trump. They want to impeach him.
And when you found out that they had called in Watergate star witness and former Nixon White House counsel John Dean, what did you think?
Well, my first thought was, my staff told me, and I said, they're punking me. You know, I thought, this can't be true. I mean, John Dean, here's a guy who has no veracity at all. Nobody can trust what he says. He was the cover-up master of criminality. That's what every investigation said. 19 discrepancies that the Senate committee found. And here he is. He spent 45 years trying to make money off rehabilitating himself. And I just thought, well, this really can't be serious. And so I'm still a little bit astonished that they're going to bring this guy in. So why do you think they did it, Congressman? Well, what they're trying to do is they're trying to have some kind of odd moral equivalency. What they're going to say is John Dean's going to come out and he's going to say, look, as bad as I was, nothing I did compares to how bad President Trump is. Because that's the way he's made his money over time. He said the same thing about President Bush. He said the same thing about President Reagan. And that's the way he makes his money. So that's what he's going to come in and say.
What does this tell you overall about the direction in which Democrats are going following the release of the Mueller report?
Well, I think they were disappointed with the Mueller report. And Nancy Pelosi has done her level best to try to slow down the impeachment talk. It's not happening. So when you're going to bring in somebody who he has no more information than you or I can get from reading the Mueller report, it just indicates kind of this real sense of desperation on their part, where they're throwing a Hail Mary today, I think.
Very interesting. As far as the release of the highly anticipated IG report, the Inspector General's report, I want to ask you about this. Ian Pryor, former DOJ Deputy Director of Public Affairs, was on America's Newsroom earlier this morning and said this about the limits of that.
The IG really can only get into current FBI and DOJ employees, right? It can't go beyond into the greater intelligence community. What I do expect is there will be recommendations on how to improve the FISA process. I think there will be enough grist for the mill for the president and his allies to start puncturing this Democratic narrative that, you know, this was somehow, you know, a fair investigation from the beginning. But I think the real meat where we're going to complete the puzzle is what John Durham is able to do.
Yeah, Mark Meadows was on over the weekend with Maria Bartiromo on Sunday Morning Futures and suggested that he's not optimistic now that we're going to see that IG report by the end of June, which William Barr told us to anticipate, or that he was anticipating that date. What do you know? What can you tell us about that?
Well, I agree with Mark. I think it's going to be coming out a little bit later. If you remember when he did the last IG report, a lot of material came in the last 3 or 4 weeks. And when that came in, it actually extended his time for several more months. But that was the heart of it. That's where you found about Strzok and Page, and that's where you found more about Bruce and Nellie Orr and Christopher Steele. You found all of that in the last few weeks of his investigation, which then turned it into a need for a longer time of investigation. I think that would not be surprising if that happened here. I think we're still probably 4 weeks off at least, maybe a little bit longer.
All right. We will anticipate that. We appreciate your time this morning ahead of that hearing on the Mueller report. Congressman Andy Biggs, thank you.
Thanks, Sandra.